Hey guys, what's up? My name is Zach, and welcome back to another election prediction. I realize it's been quite a long time since I've had any activity on this channel at all, and I'll be sure to discuss that at the end of the video if you're interested and what I have planned in the future. Because obviously a lot has changed since I've last uploaded to this channel, and I'd like to address all that. But at the end of this video, after I've discussed this, so what we're going to have right here is Joe Biden versus Trump. Since the last time I've made my prediction, obviously um, the primaries are over. We know who the candidates are at this point. And now it's going to be Biden versus Trump for the most of my presidential elections. Might do a few hypothetical ones between, like, Trump and Bernie, or maybe some hypothetical candidate, just to see for argument's sake what could happen if some alternative matchup occurs. But obviously presidential elections predictions right now should be focusing on this, since this is what the outcome is going to be, and the for the election, at least between Biden and Trump. So as for safe blue states and safe red states, I'd say for the most part not a whole lot has changed since my last prediction. I mean, these states have been generally this way for years now, so it's not really surprised that they're pretty much the same. Some states that I would like to comment on, though, that I do generally list as safe in some of my other videos, but I would still like to talk about regardless. New Mexico I would be listing as solid blue for Biden. At least in the recent weeks, I mean, it's kind of like been a bit of a roller coaster in terms of Biden's public view and his chances, I guess, in general when it comes to facing Trump. Just like a month ago or 2 months ago, I don't think anybody would have thought that Biden has a good fighting chance of beating Trump. But as of now, as of me making this video towards the end of June of 2020, about 5 months out from the election in November, Biden's odds are looking very, very good. And me personally, I don't think that's anything. I don't think it has anything to do with Biden's own personal outcome and chances improving. I think it really is just about Trump just doing badly in general, and then since elections are binary, people just end up supporting Biden as a result. I think that Biden's, if anything, has been keeping a low profile for the past 2 months. I mean, Republicans' new nickname for him is Puxahani Joe, or something like that, after the the groundhog, because he doesn't leave his basement, which honestly I think is a smart move on his part. I think that Republicans are going after him and saying that for the most part just because they want him to go out and they want him to make more gaffes. They want him to have more of those embarrassing moments, which obviously at this point everyone knows about, because Republicans are so very effective at propaganda. But yeah, that's what we've been seeing with Biden and Trump. That's the mentality so far, and will that last? Who knows? But for now, this is what it will be looking like. Colorado, I'd also be listing as safe blue, and this is really because, I mean, obviously in 2016 it was a bit close. I believe it was within 5 points for Hillary Clinton, which normally in any other outcome would cause me to, and I have been listing Colorado as likely and not solid for the Democrats in past election predictions, but I genuinely don't think at this point in the election, 5 months out, that there's any chance for Trump to win in Colorado. And Republicans know this. Republicans know that Colorado is no longer the toss-up it once was 20 years ago. Colorado is very Democratic-friendly territory. The Republican senator here, who's running for re-election in Colorado, is slim to no chances. I think his odds of getting re-elected are even probably lower than Doug Jones, the Democratic senator of Alabama's odds of being re-elected. Just because of how much this state has trended towards the Democrats in recent years, and that's been pretty apparent. So New Mexico and Colorado, both solid blue, and that's my reasoning for it. And now we're going to be going into the likely states. So the first state I'm going to be listing as likely is Virginia. Virginia is another state that went to Hillary Clinton even by a slimmer margin than Colorado did, I believe, in 2016. Many people think that Hillary Clinton won this state primarily because of her running mate, Tim Kaine, because he was he still is the senior senator of Virginia. So, and again, but we also have to look at recent elections. 2018 is a big benchmark I've been using for a lot of my predictions for 2020 in general. After seeing the 2018 elections, I mean, Virginia looks solidly blue. They have a Democratic trifecta in both a legislature and having a Democratic governor. There's not a whole lot of hope for Republicans in Virginia at this point. It's really just those affluent areas, around, D.C. up near here, that really create a Democratic powerhouse for the most part. Republicans can really rely on those more southern and more rural-esque areas of Virginia to vote for them. But when it comes to cities and places like Richmond and Alexandria and those urban areas, and suburban areas especially, is what has made Virginia so solidly blue. The suburban areas have been rapidly going to the Democrats in recent years, and that's been very helpful for Democrats in Virginia, and I think that trend will continue. Going over to Maine at large, the entire vote for Maine, those two electoral votes, I'd be listing that as likely as well. Again, Hillary Clinton pretty had a more difficult time with this area than people expected, but again, if we look at 2018, that second district, which is probably one of the most rural areas of America. I've seen people been saying that the second district is one of the most rural areas in America. That went blue. Maine at large is certainly remaining pretty blue. In the Senate, it doesn't look very good for Republicans either. This area is looking riskier and riskier as the days go by. In Maine at large, I think that Biden could very handedly get. I don't see a reason why Biden wouldn't be able to win Maine at large at this point. Going over to New Hampshire, I usually characterize New Hampshire pretty closely with whatever I characterize Maine at large with, just because their demographics and characteristics are so similar to each other. Not just in terms of geography; they're both very close neighbors, but just in terms of just makeup in general. I think New Hampshire does have different tendencies than Maine. Obviously, every state's going to be a bit different, but New Hampshire at this point, I would list pretty solidly for the Democrats. Some would say not. Some would say that, in 2016, Hillary Clinton barely edged out the state, and it didn't really look too great for them in 2018. The state wasn't nearly as solid for Democrats as Democrats would have liked it to be in 2018. But regardless, I still think that Biden has far more appeal up here and in the state than Trump does. In the Northeast in general, I think that Biden has blocked up pretty well at this point. So I'll be listing New Hampshire likely in Biden's column. Going over to Iowa, pretty early, but I'm going to be listing Iowa likely in Trump's column. I think that Iowa is very interesting in general in terms of the electorate, considering the fact that as early as 2016 and 2018, and even now, I don't know why I'm saying that it's like past tense. Even now, this state is considered to be a toss-up state and considered to be a competitive state. But I think that really just mostly applies to low-level midterm races and things like that. In terms of presidential elections, I don't think that this state has a very good chance at going back to the Democrats. I don't think that this state is going to be going to the Democrats in general because, for a while, this state was the outlier. Republicans, everyone knows Republicans represent rural and, Democrats represent urban, but this state has been the exception. If anything, the state has been leaning blue in the past 2 decades, in terms of, when you consider Barack Obama's election in 2008 and 2012. And even in terms of the House and in the Senate, the state had been pretty friendly to Democrats, but we're seeing that rural makeup is becoming more and more skewed towards Republicans. We're seeing that Republicans are doing better and better here, and I know that people are going to bring up the tariffs. I think that Trump's tariffs are absolutely going to be a factor in rural areas in election, but I don't see it being enough of a factor for Republicans to lose that rural characteristic vote that they always can rely on. I don't think that those tariffs are going to be enough. I think that it's absolutely going to hurt Trump. I think he's going to lose a good share of the farming. I think it could hurt him in the House, especially in those low-level midterms. Tariffs. We saw this in 2018 as well. A lot of Democrats won in generally rural areas by campaigning on against the tariffs and using the tariffs that Trump's been using against China, which has caused problems with different crop prices in this country. We've seen Democrats weaponize that against Trump and make it poisonous for him in these rural areas. But in terms of statewide elections, I don't see it going. I don't see that being enough of a factor to make this state anything but likely in Trump's column. And I think that Trump does have this area locked down pretty well in that regard. Now going over to Nevada, I'll be listing that likely for Biden. And again, I look back at 2018. I look back at the fact that most people were considering that this state would be more of a chance for Dean Heller, the former Republican senator here. Most people suspected that he would be able to hold that better than Democrats in Missouri and North Dakota, despite the fact that these are solid red areas. And I really think that that's just the sign of the times in terms of the fact that the blue areas of this country are becoming bluer. I said this in my reflection video on the midterms as well. Blue areas becoming bluer, red areas becoming redder, purple areas becoming purpler. We've been seeing that as well. The more unpredictable states are becoming more and more unpredictable. For the most part, I think there are some exceptions when you look at things like places like Florida and Ohio and Iowa, but I'll get to that later. But Nevada is absolutely becoming more and more friendly towards Democrats. I don't see Republicans having a good shot at clawing this from the Democrats, regardless whether it's the president, whether it's the House, whether it's the Senate. Democrats have this area pretty locked up, just as a combination of the Latino vote, which is always going to be skewed in their favor, and in terms of just the growing demographic that I think suburbanism is absolutely playing a role for Democrats in the state as well. So just like I was talking about for Virginia, those suburban areas, because Nevada can really be boiled down to the two city states. It's just Reno and Las Vegas that are really the main and only major population centers in this state, and we consider those suburban areas around Las Vegas and in Reno, and consider the fact that suburban areas are becoming more friendly towards Democrats, then you can understand why this state is pretty likely to go back to Democrats. Now, Ohio, just like Iowa, normally a toss-up, still considered a toss-up, but regardless, I will be listing it as likely in Trump's column because of the fact that I think that Trump, in general, as a person, I mean, we're talking about this in terms of Republicans in general trying to apply to, the House and the Senate, but Trump as a person, I think that has a unique advantage as a Republican to lock up these Midwestern states that normally Republicans have some trouble with. But Trump, for all his shortcomings in other areas of the electoral map, which I'll cover on later, does hold these areas very solidly. Iowa and Ohio, I guarantee, would not be nearly as friendly towards any other Republican candidate as Trump is, and I think that's just the pattern of populism, which supports Trump in general, having that base of a movement behind you, and Trump's appeal to the Midwest, even regardless of those tariffs, he does appeal to the Midwest, and he does appeal to those areas, and I think that Ohio is a direct reflection of that, despite their more urban areas throughout the state. It does look very friendly to Trump, and I think that it will likely go to him in 5 months. And Texas, I'll be listing Texas as likely red for Trump as well. A lot of people and a lot of pundits want to list this state as leaning red or even a toss-up. They want to characterize Texas as a toss-up. I think that Texas should absolutely be talked about in terms of the fact that it's becoming more competitive. It's rapidly becoming more competitive. It went to Trump by around 5 points in 2016. It went to Ted Cruz over Beto O'Rourke by around 3 points. So that lead that the Republicans hold in general, in the House they got decimated. The Republicans lost a ton of seats in the House, and they might lose more seats. They probably will lose more seats in the 2020 House election as well. So we see this state as a whole, which was once the Republican powerhouse. It was the Republicans' California, and it still is for the most part, despite the fact that it's slipping from their column. But this state is really their powerhouse. We see those 38 electoral votes. We see how much that now bumps up Trump now that I called it in his column. Once Republicans lose this state, they need to start changing things because if they don't reverse this trend of Texas going to the Democrats, they're going to be screwed come 2024, come 2028, and in future elections. Like, they're not going to be able to win. They could do solidly in the Midwest. They can do solidly even in the Rust Belt states, which they still are having trouble with. But even if they did do solidly there, if they don't have Texas, they don't have the election in general, whether it's the presidency, whether it's the House, and even the Senate. It's really the state that they need to count on, and it's leaving their column very quickly, and they need to be concerned. But I still think it's too early to call this state out of Trump's column, because I do think that Trump is going to be able to mobilize some support. I don't think that Biden's the right candidate either to win Texas. I think that he has a shot. I certainly think that he has a shot in terms of appealing to those moderate Democrats that do play a role in Texas, just like they do in Arizona, which I'll talk about later. But those moderate Democrats will absolutely be crucial at getting out the vote. And I think that Biden very well could. I could very well end up be calling this state, leaning instead of likely later in the election, depending on where this state goes. But for now, Republicans' efforts are concentrated at holding this state because they know how important it is, and I don't think that Trump is going to lose this state to Biden. I don't see that happening, at least as of now. Now going over to Pennsylvania, I'll be listing Pennsylvania likely in Biden's column. This is another state that went to Trump in 2016, and I'm pretty sure this is the first state that I'm flipping from Trump's column to Biden's. I think it's the appropriate, because Biden, although he's a senator from Delaware and does not seemingly have any connections to Pennsylvania, he does. He has very deep connections to Pennsylvania. I believe he was born and raised in Scranton and knows the area well. He's served with the officials here, and he has close connections here. And a big reason why Obama won Pennsylvania both in 2008 and in 2012, was because Biden was on the ticket. And it was because Biden was on the ticket that he was able to appeal to Pennsylvania very well. And I think that the Pennsylvania argument has been a compelling argument for Biden, at least as an electoral candidate in general, because this state is essential for Democrats to win. Because if Democrats aren't winning Pennsylvania, you can bet that they're not going to be winning anywhere else in the Rust Belt. If Democrats are having trouble in Pennsylvania, they're almost certainly having trouble in states like Michigan and in Minnesota and certainly Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the most difficult and most toss-up out of all these states that were once Democratic-friendly states. But Biden, I think, securing Pennsylvania and having good appeal in the Rust Belt in general. I think that Pennsylvania absolutely characterizes the Rust Belt, and him being so secure in this state is a big help for him. And I do think that he will likely have this state come 5 months in November. And then going over to Minnesota, I would call this likely for Biden as well. I think that the recent circumstance we've been seeing with the riots and the protests across the country over disproportionate police killings against African Americans, which originated here in this state, will have a good effect when it comes to Democrats in terms of turnout in this state. Maybe not the most important factor, but I do believe that these recent things that are occurring are going to assist Democrats. The fact that this state, went solidly for the most part to Democrats in 2018. I think there were some exceptions in the midterms. Democrats did not do nearly as well as I had anticipated in terms of the House in Minnesota. But this area overall seems... I mean, Trump and the Republican Party have been trying to characterize Minnesota for whatever reason. I don't know why they picked this state, but they've been trying to say that Minnesota is going to go red in 2020, and Trump has tweeted numerous times that is going to be the case. But we don't see any indicators of this occurring. We don't see any indicators that Minnesota... which did go nearly to Hillary Clinton in 2016, but has since started trending back blue since then. We don't see any indicators that that's likely. And I think that Biden being able to appeal to, maybe to those more rural and moderate, older voters will give him an edge in this state over Trump. And I will be characterizing Minnesota likely for Biden for those reasons. Now we're going to be going over to leans. I've characterized all the likely states, and now we're going to be going over to the leaning states, which is the second to last category after tilts, which I will cover last. Georgia, I'm going to be characterizing as leaning red. Again, this is another state that I do believe is becoming more and more that Republicans should be worrying about in the same regard that they're worrying about Texas. Just like the Hispanic vote is making things more competitive for Republicans in Texas, it's that African American vote that is making things more competitive for Republicans in Georgia, and we're seeing that in urbanization as well. Atlanta, Macon, and Savannah, all those urban centers are becoming more and more essential and becoming a larger and larger share of the electorate here. The rural areas losing its power to the urban areas, not just in Georgia but throughout the country, but especially in Georgia. And when you consider the fact that that's where the African American vote is, and that's where the Democratic vote is, and how fast that's growing. I mean, Stacey Abrams lost this state by a hair, and she claims that she should have won it due to unequal voter turnout and alleged voter fraud, which there was a whole court case over, I believe. But Georgia is becoming more and more Democratic friendly. But again, I think it's too early I think it absolutely is competitive. I think that Biden does have a shot at winning the state, especially if he picks a Georgia vice presidential candidate like Mayor Bottoms of Atlanta, or even Stacey Abrams, who still has a shot at becoming Biden's vice president. I think that both those vice presidential candidates could very well push the state out of leaning territory and into toss-up territory for the Republicans if Biden wants to focus his efforts on here. But we still have yet to see how much the Democratic Party, how much the Biden campaign wants to focus in on Georgia as a likely state that they could win. But for now, I still think that this state's Republican roots are going to keep it in Trump's column unless Democrats really pull out some big effort in this state, which is possible. Michigan, I'll be characterizing as lean blue. Again, the Rust Belt. I think that the fact that Biden doing so well in Pennsylvania and in Minnesota, and his appeal to the Rust Belt in general, I mean, from day one, that's been the number one draw to Biden, is that he's always been a Rust Belt politician, having good appeal to middle-class Rust Belt voters, regardless whether it's in Delaware, Pennsylvania, or throughout the Rust Belt in general. I mean, that's part of why Obama did so well in general. I think it's a very compelling argument for why Biden is a good candidate. And I think that in general, Trump's disapproval in these states is going to do him in to some degree. I mean, we're seeing very concerning polling numbers coming out that show Biden leading by double digits, almost in the 20s over Trump in some of these states, which obviously should be a big warning sign for Trump and the Republican Party, which they've seen, they have acknowledged at this point as being a huge threat to their re-election efforts. But for those reasons, I think that Biden does have a very good shot at winning Michigan, and I would continue to characterize Michigan as being a pretty good shot for Biden and the Democrats to keep come November 2020. Wisconsin, I'll be characterizing as lean blue as well. Again, I think that Wisconsin, this places Biden over the top and allows him to win the election, with Wisconsin being called in this column. But Wisconsin, I would absolutely characterize as being the most difficult to call out of any Rust Belt state, and the most competitive at any Rust Belt state for whatever reason. I think it's a combination of the fact that it's more rural than maybe Michigan and Pennsylvania. It's got less of that industrial and urban environment there, and combined with the fact that Democrats have traditionally done well here and do still do well amongst rural voters, despite the fact that Republicans that's the Republicans' target group. This does seem to be some of the exception, just like it was in Iowa. But Wisconsin, I do believe the Democrats have a solid chance, and more than a solid chance at taking it back from Trump come a few months. And I think that it's a combination of Trump's disapproval, like I said before, his disapproval amongst the Rust Belt states has become apparent in recent months, and Biden's appeal, I think, could very well overlap Trump's, and I think that given those factors, he does have a very good shot at taking Wisconsin. Maine second, I would be characterizing as lean red. Again, I was talking about that earlier. That's that district that is very rural. One of the most rural areas of the country. Trump won this area pretty solidly in 2016. We did see it go to the Democrats very narrowly, almost by technicality, because of the way the state decided to change their voting rules. For ranked choice voting is what really allowed the Democrats to win this area. But there's not going to be ranked choice voting in the presidential election, so if we were considering it there, the Republicans still do technically hold this area, but it was still narrow either way. I don't want to split hairs. But I do think that Trump, as a candidate rather than as a Republican, does have a good hold on this area. This is a very pro-gun, very conservative, individual rights-esque area of the country that I think that Trump will be able to appeal more strongly over than Biden. So for that reason, I'll be characterizing it leading in Trump's column. But again, it's always difficult to characterize individual districts when you're talking about the entire country. That's why Maine and Nebraska, the two states that do it that way, are always kind of hard to call when characterizing them, at least. Now we're going to go over to tilts, and tilts just mean I can basically go either way. At this point, it's very difficult to say, and that's the way I characterize it for 3 states in one district. These 3 states in the one district in Nebraska. For the first state I'll be calling for tilt is North Carolina. I would say that North Carolina at this point is leaning very narrowly in Trump's column. The reason why I would traditionally list North Carolina as being leaning, if anything, for the Republicans, but right now it's tilt. Right now it's tilt because Biden has been leading in some polls in this state, and I do think that suburban vote shifting towards the Democrats is a huge factor in a state like North Carolina, which is characterized overwhelmingly by those suburbs around those big cities in terms of turnout, in terms of the areas that determine and make or break an election. Biden has been performing well there. Biden's performing well in polls. Nevertheless, this state has been very finicky, to say the least, for Democrats trying to win it. Ever since Obama won the state in 2008, Democrats have not been doing very well here since. There's some exceptions. Roy Cooper has been the Democratic governor here with very solid approval for the past few years. But the Democrats, in terms of the House, in terms of the Senate, have not found much luck here. Will that change in 2020? It's very hard to say. But I do think that Republicans still have the edge here, and we will see. I think that the Biden campaign should make a concerted effort here, since the suburban vote and even the African Americans are what make the state competitive for Democrats. But campaigning towards those more white middle class suburban voters I think will be the biggest factor in this state. And I think that that's right at the Biden campaign's alley when it comes to the electorate. So efforts should be directed here if they want to push the state out of tilting and maybe into their column, possibly, by the election day. Florida, I'll be characterizing as tilt red. in past elections, I've been listing this state more and more friendly to Trump, especially since the 2018 midterms, where we saw the Republicans create a Republican trifecta in the state government, securing the governorship and the other Senate position, flipping it from blue to red. On paper, this state does seem to be becoming more Republican, but we have to acknowledge the margins and the very, very slim margins that they're doing it by. The Republicans are barely holding these states. The Republicans are barely securing the elections here, but they are, regardless. And I think that Trump, I think I would consider Florida to be more so Trump's home state than New York. I think he actually switched his residency here, for the most part, just to get out of the all the lawsuits that were being filed against him in New York. That was a bit of a maneuver on his part to switch his residency to avoid those. But in terms of the electorate, I think that will help him. Mar-a-Lago, I mean, the summer White House is definitely given Trump a lot of credibility and a lot of good standing in the state overall. So I will continue to characterize Florida being, just from the start, being in the Republicans' column. And the Biden campaign is going to have to work to shift that if they want to secure Florida come 2020. Nebraska, that second district, which is Omaha and the surrounding suburbs, I'm going to be characterizing as tilt blue. And this is because, we've been seeing in 2018 and in 2016, when this district flipped from blue to red in the House, Republicans do seem to be doing well in this district, and they narrowly won it. They narrowly won it in 2018. But it is becoming more narrow, and I think that Trump's standing in this district, and especially Trump as a person, I think the Republican Party could do well in this district in terms of the House, and in terms of just voting makeup in general. But Trump as a candidate, I think, will be held accountable by the more suburban voters of this state, which he does not, or that district which he does not been doing well with. And I think that Biden does have a fighting chance at taking that area, just from its, but Biden's appeal to the more Midwestern and more older white voters, I think, will absolutely do him well in a district like Nebraska's second. So I think that for now, Biden does tentatively hold a solid chance at winning that district over Trump. And the last I'll be characterizing is Arizona. Arizona is definitely shaping up to be one of the most interesting states for the 2020 election. This state has not been considered a toss-up in a very long time. This is the first election that I can recall in like over 30 years that it's being considered a toss-up, and it's a combination of that growing Latino vote, which is making states like Nevada more Democratic, and states like Texas less Republican and more towards the Democrats. And it's really shaping up very well here. We're seeing that the Democrats have a very good chance at taking a second Senate seat after winning a Senate seat for the Republicans for the first time in decades. Just in 2018, they look like they're poised to take the second Senate seat as well. Biden's poll numbers have been solid here, and I really think it's a combination of the fact that this state, although it is shifting blue, it's shifting moderate blue, shifting centrist blue. Kyrsten Sinema, who is the Democratic senator who was just elected, is by all means a centrist Democrat. She is not a progressive Democrat, and she's even more towards the middle than really centrist Democrats like in Montana and in West Virginia, just based on the way she's been voting. And the same is true with the Democratic candidate who's running here as well. His name slips my mind. He was a former astronaut. He's got a twin brother who is also an astronaut. He is I'm sure you all know who he is. His name is just slipping my mind, but he is a centrist as well. So it's really, to be specific, it's a state that's becoming more friendly to centrist Democrats. A progressive is not going to be winning here. Bernie Sanders is not going to be winning in Arizona. But Biden is a moderate, and if it comes between a choice between Biden and Trump, at this point, I would characterize it in Biden's column, and I would characterize Arizona as being slightly in Biden's column, which is big for Democrats. This is a state that has been a Republican stronghold of anything for decades, and now we're seeing that demographics are changing, the party's changing, Trump's presence in the election and Trump's effect on the electorate in general is making the state shift rapidly towards the Democratic Party, and I do think that Biden has a chance at flipping the state and making it blue come 2020. Alright, so this is the map, I believe, with Biden with 290 and Trump with 248, Biden having 20 electoral votes over the necessary number to win. With this electorate and in these current odds, I would say that Biden has a 60% chance at this point of winning in 2020. He could afford to lose states like Arizona. He can afford to lose these states which have already characterized against him. What he can't afford to lose is a state like Wisconsin. That's the next state that I think would be likely going out of his column if any state, if any of these blue states would be going to red. I would say Arizona and Wisconsin are the two most likely ones. But even then, it's 269 and 269. That would make this a even election would go to the House of Representatives, and at that point, when you're talking about that small difference, I mean, and when you consider the fact that there's these individual districts here, which could very well flip as well, it makes it very unpredictable. Which is why 60%, I put it just over 50 at this point. But I do think that Wisconsin is unlikely. Wisconsin is really what holds the Democrats' lead and Biden's lead in the election together. I think that doing solidly in Wisconsin and throughout the Rust Belt in general is essential. Obviously, this is common sense to anyone who is reviewing the 2020 election in general, but I'm just going to reiterate it. They need Wisconsin. They need Michigan. They need Pennsylvania. They certainly need Minnesota. They need that whole area if they have any hopes at winning. They could. If they don't do well here, they almost certainly aren't doing it well in Arizona and other places that they need to win as well. All right, that's the election prediction, and now I'd like to talk about what I have planned for this channel and in terms of what I want to do going forward in general. If some of you have maybe noticed, I have recently made a Twitch channel. I'm starting to do Twitch live streams. So I do enjoy doing election predictions. This is something that I do enjoy doing and discussing. But I also enjoy very much discussing politics and discussing current affairs and having those political debates. I do enjoy that very much. And I would like to start doing that on my Twitch channel. If you're interested in that, feel free to go check it out. I'll put the link in the description. The link is Zach__Z. You can just search it up on Twitch. If you're not on Twitch, just get on there. It's pretty cool. Not sponsored, obviously, but it's I love Twitch, and it's a great platform to be on. In terms of this channel, I will do more election predictions. I will do more things like that. I plan to do a Senate prediction coming up. I plan to do a House prediction coming up. Possibly a House prediction. Not the 3-hour-long one I did 2 years back, if any of you remember that. Maybe some kind of House characterization. Maybe a 2-hour-long House prediction video in the near future if you guys request that. We'll see. But in general, I got plans for this channel. I got plans for what I want to do going forward with this kind of stuff in general. And I hope you guys come along. I know it's been a while, but I'm back now, and I hope I can still put out content that you all enjoy. That's all I care about at the end of the day when it comes to this stuff. So yeah, hope you guys have a good day, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and take care.